Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and I'm gonna start getting in the habit of doing more like live streams. So this is my first attempt at doing a live stream with Riverside FM. So we'll see how this goes. If people enjoy this, then I'll do more of it, where I'll just randomly do a live stream, talk about some sort of random topic that hopefully you guys enjoy. And this should be streaming to LinkedIn, this should be streaming to YouTube, should be streaming to Twitter and to Twitch. Okay, so if you want to follow these live streams on any of those platforms, you can do so. Now, for those of you who've never seen me before or know who I am, my name is Alex Merced. I'm currently the head of DevRel at Dremio, which is a Lakehouse platform. And that's going to be what I talk about today. That's something that I've spent the last 4 years educating. The way I always like to say it is like I like to educate, entertain, and enlighten. So I spent the last 4 years doing that around the Lakehouse technologies, whether it's Dremio, Apache Iceberg, Apache Polaris, and I've written a lot of books on the subject. So if you see that QR code over there to the side of my head, you can scan that and you can download many of these books for free, along with lots of other great resources like tutorials, uh, Luma calendars, so that way you can follow events in the space, and other resources there. So you can scan that QR code. There's also that little QR code with my face over there. That is if you want to kind of get my information, so such as like email, my different websites, and also if you want to give me your information if you wanted to stay in touch. But before I kind of get into today's topic, which is going to be Apache Iceberg REST Catalog and what is Apache Iceberg REST Catalog, what I want to do is encourage you all to try out the new Dremio Cloud free trial. Okay, so bottom line, if you head over to dremio.com/get started or click the link on the screen, you can try out that trial. It's completely free. This is great for a lake house platform in the sense that you don't have to put a credit card down. You don't have to bring your own infrastructure. You can just try it, get hands on, see what the features are, um, give it a shot. I promise you'll like what you see. But now that I've established that, let's kind of get into today's topic, which is Apache Iceberg REST Catalog. So to understand this, let's establish a few things. What is Apache Iceberg? So bottom line, one of the big trends nowadays, as I mentioned, is data lakehouse. And to understand what data lakehouse is, you need to understand what data warehouse and data lake is. So let's kind of build this pyramid. So a data warehouse is generally think of it as a database for analytics. It's the simplest way to think about it. So basically, traditional databases are oftentimes optimized for transactional workloads. Think about it like what you want to do really quickly. Essentially, like, hey, I'm creating a new account, so I need to add a new user. Oh, I'm going to retrieve this photo, so I need to go retrieve that record from a rec. So basically, it's adding a record, subtracting a record, updating a record, doing these kinds of transactions really, really, really fast. But that is not optimal for analytics because in analytics, you're not trying to add or subtract necessarily a single record. You're trying to work with or aggregate, average out data among many records, but only across a few columns of that record. A record is essentially, think like Alex as a record. So there's my name, there's my phone number, there's my email. Each of these things is a column in my record. So when I want to say, hey, I want to look at all the average height of every user, well, that means I need to pull that height column for every user, so for every record, but I don't need all the other information in every other record. So I'd rather be able to pull columns than pull rows. So generally, analytical systems are optimized for that type of workload. The way they work under the hood, the way they save data, the way they move data around is just completely different, optimized for different types of ways of working with data. But like databases, data warehouse systems are oftentimes an integrated system. It's a black box where you put data in and you can work with data within the box. Now, as companies have gotten bigger and the needs of data have gotten more complicated, the problem is with having a bunch of black boxes is that different teams using different black boxes need to share data with each other. And this becomes really complicated because now I got to move a copy of your data into my black box. You got to move some of your data into my black box. And you end up with lots of copies of the data. You end up with a lot of inconsistencies. You end up with a lot of costs and time delays of having to do all these data movements. So the idea is like, how do we break the box open? So the first step of that is figuring out, okay, where is a place that is sort of an open place to store data? And this concept is the data lake. The idea is just a storage layer. But the storage layer that's become sort of the standard for this kind of pattern is object storage. So think of like an Amazon or AWS S3. Think of Azure Data Lake Storage, ADLS. Think of Google Blob Storage. These are things where it does something called object storage. I'm not gonna get too deep into how object storage is and how that's different than necessarily block storage and all that. I'll save that conversation for another time. But the idea is that you have this place where you can store data files that's scalable for an enterprise. So everyone can store their data there, everyone can access it there, assuming they were given permission. Um, so good, we got an open storage layer, but then that's called a data lake. Okay, the idea is just it's a lake of data. It's just a free flowing water of data. Problem is, it doesn't necessarily give you the same sort of benefits of a data warehouse. Okay, because data warehouses, again, they're not just a place to store data, they have all these other layers on top. They're able to tell which data belongs to which data set. They're able to know, be aware of which data sets are available and who has access to them. They're able to process queries. Data lakes, the storage layer, a standalone storage layer can't do that. So the idea is you build on top of that with things like a table format, like an Apache Iceberg. So this is where Apache Iceberg fits in. Apache Iceberg acts as this layer that says, okay, but don't just read the files off the storage, okay? Because there might be 1,000 files in this particular data set, and if you just go straight there, you're going to end up looking through 1,000 files when you only needed 10. So how about this? We're going to aggregate statistics and information around the files that are part of the data set and put them in separate files called metadata files. So when a tool that wants to process the data goes and accesses the data, instead of going to the data first, it goes to the metadata first. And Iceberg is the metadata. Okay, it's the data about the data. It's the standard for how to write that data. So the idea is that the engine, the thing that's doing the processing, will go to the metadata, be able to understand sort of, okay, hey, these 1,000 files are part of the table. This information's in this file. This information's in this file. And I can realize, oh, wait a second, I don't need to scan all 1,000 files for my particular question, my particular query. I only need to scan 10 of them, okay? Resulting in much faster queries, so much more data warehouse-like performance. And on top of it, the way all this metadata is structured and the way you work with this metadata, I won't get too deep into sort of the mechanisms right now, but it brings back a lot of those guarantees and functionality that you would expect in the data warehouse. And then when you throw in a catalog like an Apache Polaris to track those tables and govern those tables, you now have a system that's made up of disparate components that feels like that integrated data warehouse. Thus, with the data lake, your open storage as at its core. Thus the term data lake house. So now everyone puts it into this open box, okay, made up of these separate components. And now instead of having to copy data between different organizations, they can just share access because they're all, even though they may be using different tools, the data is all going into the same sort of storage paradigm or warehousing paradigm of the data lake house. Cool. But I mentioned there's sort of two pieces there. There's the metadata layer, which is the table format like Apache Iceberg, and then there's the catalog layer, the thing that tracks those tables and governs those tables like an Apache Polaris. Now those two things work well, but the engines need to talk to the catalog to know what tables there are. And what happened is in the early days of Apache Iceberg, every catalog came up with its own way to talk to that catalog. So the problem is that you would choose X catalog and you may be using X tool, but X tool has not built support for that particular catalog you're using. Now, the promise of Iceberg was interoperability. The idea that, hey, I can use my data anywhere and everywhere with whatever tool I like. So now all this friction within my organization between departments doesn't have to be there. So you ended up having all this friction between different catalogs that worked in different places and whatnot. So the result, the answer to that wasn't to to sit there and say, hey, there's only one catalog that everyone has to use, but to say, hey, there's going to be one set way for engines to talk to catalogs. And long as every engine knows how to talk that way and every catalog knows how to talk that way, that's essentially a standard API for talking between these two things. And a very popular way to create these kind of standard APIs, typically like there's three approaches. There's REST APIs, which is what Iceberg chose for this particular purpose. There's, well, GraphQL is kind of its own category, and it's kind of a whole other conversation. And then there's RPC, remote procedure calls, which is what was used for things like Apache Aeroflight and MCP. So, and I want to get into the differences between these different protocol standards or sort of frameworks for designing protocols. But the idea is that they went with the REST approach, where basically the idea is that I want to tell the server, the catalog, to do things. And the way I tell the catalog to do things is by making requests to different URLs for each different thing that I want it to do. Okay, so each action that I want the server to take has its own URL that I send a specific message to tell it to do that thing. Okay, whether it's, hey, give me a list of all your tables, hey, I need to update where this table points to, and so forth. So that is how that works. So basically, they create this sort of standard roadmap for how this talking is going to happen. And then basically nowadays, every catalog implements that standard and every engine knows how to talk to that standard. And the result is you now have pretty good interoperability to use your Iceberg tables with whatever catalog you want and whatever tool you want. Okay. And the idea is that the Iceberg project, now you have like this discussion of catalogs. And now the question is, what is going to be the standard for everything else? What about the not Iceberg stuff? And this is where like where it does matter which catalog becomes standard. Again, my opinion, my conviction is that Apache Polaris will become that standard, that open standard that everyone will kind of build on and expand beyond Iceberg on. Why? Again, conversation for a different live stream, just because I want to wrap this up in a minute. But hopefully you guys found this interesting as far as like what is REST catalog, what is Iceberg, especially if you weren't familiar with some of these concepts. But again, you can learn a lot more by scanning that QR code to the side to get lots of cool resources. And again, I encourage you to go try out that Dremio free trial. Head over to dremio.com/get started. Try out the trial. I actually have some videos on the Dremio YouTube channel where you can get hands-on with Dremio. And chances are in the future I'll do some live streams where I'll get hands-on with Dremio and just show some of these lakehouse concepts using Dremio so you can kind of see this stuff in action. But with that, I'm going to wrap up this first live stream. Again, leave comments if you're enjoying the live stream or if you want me to keep doing more of these. There is a chance that this one's really choppy because my hotel Wi-Fi isn't the greatest because I'm in California now for a bundle of events. I've done 3 out of 4 of them. And actually, well, 3 out of 5 because technically there's a webinar I'll be doing shortly. But I'm going to go get ready for those other events now. So I'll see you all later. Have a great day and